burden on and strap down the existing businesses and property owners. So this treatment as states was a political decision. It was never a decision based on hard science. It was done as a courtesy to tribal governments to honor their sovereignty. Their sovereignty is a quasi form of sovereignty. Their sovereignty comes from federal recognition. You very seldom hear a tribal government say, we're federally recognized. No, we're a freestanding sovereign. True, maybe you think you are, but your federal recognition is the existence of your authority to govern tribal members, enrolled tribal members, and tribal properties. That federal recognition is not accompanied by the ability to govern non-tribal members and non-tribal properties, and that's where the overreaching occurs. And that's where policies like treatment of states, political decisions, and the expansion of programs that allow a tribal government to come out and touch your land, touch your business, touch your life, you know, give you two governments to answer to, one in which you can't even go to the meetings and certainly can't hold office or help with the decision making. It creates just heartbreak and economic harm wherever municipalities and counties are co-located with Indian reservations. It doesn't need to be that way. Surely there is a solution that we're finally getting close to coming to. I don't know what it is. We don't presume to know what it is. But we know that something's not working now. And that there are 566 tribal governments annually subsidized by the American taxpayer. And the BIA is adding to its employee and building its workforce by relaxing the federal recognition requirements for a new Indian tribe. As though 566 is not enough. As though somebody in 2014 can say, hey, you know what? I think my ancestors were a tribe once. And that's about going to be the only requirement for federal recognition of new tribes. So the question has to be asked, how many private tribal governments in which the American taxpayer cannot participate, how many of those are we required to annually subsidize as indentured servants? We have no input. We're not consulted with the policy. We have no ability to participate in these private governments and the taxpayer is subsidizing. We have done so with a generous spirit and a generous heart for decades, at least since 1934. For decades, the American taxpayer, the American citizen has a generous spirit regarding American Indians. Generous spirit. No one has ever snibbled about having to annually subsidize these governments. But you have to think now, in the 1800s, when this country was really suffering and struggling and there were no clean hands, you know, Indians were struggling with other Indians and cavalry and settlers. This was a cruel, hard time in the 1800s, and certainly there was a time and place for federal Indian policy. But when 1924 came around, and every American Indian was made a U.S. citizen, we should have been one country then, 1924. But for John Collier, 10 years later, with his wild idea about, oh, let's do it this way. And now we have 566 private tribal governments co-located, burdening the areas in which they are located. And the conflict and pain of neighbors is really in dire straits. Difficult to talk with each other, when for decades folks grew up with each other. So in any event, this treatment as states is a very serious example of federal Indian policy redundancy, economic development with deterrent, absolute deterrent for tribal governments and the other governments. If I'm a new business coming in to think of locating with the tribal government, I have to consider sovereign immunity. I have to consider that if I submit myself to that government and sign some agreements with that tribal government, and something goes cattywampus, I have no recourse. I cannot, if a contract is breached or if the agreement with the tribal government is breached, I have no recourse. They are immune. And I have to consider those things that just double burden the new business or the existing business. So that's one of the biggest problems that EPA's program of treatment in the states has created across the country. And there's been some pushback. The EPA has no authority, and this is really probably the strongest message and the best case of success for Fremont County. The EPA has absolutely no jurisdictional authority. They have been slapped down by several courts. In 2001, they were slapped down within a 2-3-month period, one in Michigan, one in Wisconsin. And the appellate courts there told EPA, if you're going to implement a program, any EPA program in a state, and this would be a redundant program where the state's already involved and doing well, but if you're going to implement a program, you must first identify and define the jurisdiction of the parts of the state, the part of the state, and the jurisdiction of the tribal lands. Because you stand in the shoes of the state and you stand in the shoes of the tribe, EPA, you have no shoes of your own. That's a direct quote from one of the court cases. Congress never granted EPA the ability or the authority to create or change jurisdiction. That's exactly what they did here in December of 2013. And they will get slapped down again. But it's unfortunate that this current executive branch has just stuck its thumb in the eye of the courts. It just hasn't, it pays no attention to repeated defeats that EPA takes in the court. They just plow ahead anyway. And I think the most irritating and painful thing is that state governments, the counties will struggle and fight back, the cities will struggle and fight back. But the state governments who are mandated to comply with all EPA programs do nothing. When EPA bypasses them, ignores them, nullifies them, and lands on a single property owner. EPA has no business landing on a single property owner. The relationship EPA has with its program should be with the state environmental program, and the state does the environmental enforcement and work with those property owners, not EPA. But that's what they're doing here in Wyoming and all over the place. They are nullifying and neutering state authority at every opportunity, not just EPA, BLM, Bureau of Reclamation. You're going to hear some pretty serious stuff from the Montana people that are here. These federal agencies are bypassing existing relationships the states have with their federal government, bypassing, using tribal governments as pawns, with very willing pawns, but nonetheless pawns, to expand the federal control of air, water, natural resources, prime properties, by bypassing the state, going right straight out of the property owner or the citizen. They have no business, none. One of the things that we struggle against is what I call revisionist history or the narrative. And one of my pet peeves is the comment that you hear quite frequently, well, treaties are the law of the land. Treaties are the law of the land. Treaties are the supreme law of the land. Yes, they are. But like Paul Harvey, that's part of the sentence in the Constitution. The actual sentence in the Constitution has 3 parts and they're in order. They're in sequential priority order. And they're out of Article 6. This Constitution, that's the first part. And the laws of the United States, which shall be made and pursuant to this Constitution, that's the second part. And treaties, that's the third part, are the supreme law of the land. This Constitution and the laws made by Congress and treaties, in that order, are the supreme law of the land. Were it anything different, were treaties superior to the Constitution or acts of Congress, Indian tribes could never have had the Indian Game Regulatory Act. Indian tribes could never have had the Indian Self-Determination Act, Violence Against Women Act. Any of the acts of Congress would have been null and void because of these treaties. law of the land. Well, that's not true. Treaties, in fact, most of them have been long ago fulfilled, and they're dead, the wonderful, beloved historical memorabilia. But Congress has superseded treaties. At first, they stopped making them in 1871, and certainly the United States doesn't make treaties with its U.S. citizens since 1924. So it's a lovely thing to hear, oh, treaties, the law of the land, treaties. I don't think so. I appreciate the history, and I cherish the history of the growing of America and the American Indians. Very courageous folks. My husband is a Shoshone. I am a Cherokee. That's part of my history, and I value that and I cherish that. But treaties are not the law of the land, and most of them are not. The law of the land is the Constitution and the acts of Congress. And more recently, the acts of Congress are questionably constitutional on a regular basis. So one of the things I think we can look forward to in the future is as we grow the Paul Reveres, as we keep the backbone and brain lined up, one of the things we can look forward to in the future is the elimination of mistreatment of states. The elimination of any kind of race-based governing systems and programs. It has to happen in America. It's like united we stand, or we fall. And most of us are determined to stand. So that's kind of my little take on treatment of states. And with that, I'll turn it back to Butch. Thanks. Oh, sure. That's a good point, Philip. Philip Rendale is here from Washington State. Philip, let me bring you a mic. Incidentally, I'm glad he stood up because Philip Rendale is a Cowlitz Indian and was my original mentor in Toppenish, Washington. He pounded some of this stuff into me because I could not believe it.
Thanks, George. The question was, has EPA ever successfully given the any Indian tribe the authority of enforcement? I know they've tried and they've failed. Yes? Sure. And that's my question. They have tried to make it work, but I don't, as far as I know, that they've never been successful because they lack the authority. Statutory authority to do that.
So it's a program that lacks enforcement authority. That's good to know. Chris Cortland.
My name's Chris Portlander. I live on the Crow Reservation, and I own and operate the historical town of a national monument, and we have a gas station there. And just in the last 4 years, I had the EPA show up with the Crow tribe. I'm on fee simple property, so private property inside the exterior boundaries of the Crow Reservation. And they brought the Crow tribe with them. And from that point forward, they said that they are going to delegate their authority to the Crow tribe for my EPA oversight for my underground storage tanks, even though when I'm in compliance with the state of Montana EPA and have all of those regulations that I'm in compliance with, then there's more red tape with the EPA and the local tribal government when I'm a non-tribal member on private property.
What authority does the tribe have to do anything about it? Oh, what authority does the tribe have to enforce it?
They don't have any authority. It's the EPA coming in with gold badges and showing you their authority. And
EPA will enforce on their behalf. Yeah, EPA will enforce on behalf of the tribe because of the comments you just made. So, yes, it does. Well, that's good. We just want to put them in all kinds of lines. All right, good. Thank you very much.